Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for the kickoff webinar to update California's natural and working lands climate smart strategy. We're letting people in and we're going to give it just a minute before getting started. So thank you for being here. Okay. All right, I think we have a quorum here. So thank you again. My name is Amanda Hansen. I'm the Deputy Secretary for Climate Change at California's Natural Resources Agency. And I am very grateful to all of you for joining us for this kickoff webinar to update California's natural and working lands climate smart strategy. We are joined by Secretary Wade Crowfoot, who will kick us off with some opening remarks in just a moment. But before I hand the floor over to him, I just wanted to lay out a couple of housekeeping items. First is to please just make sure you're muted throughout the presentation. We are going to have a Q&A session at the end where you can unmute and pose questions. We're going to be recording this webinar and we will post it on our website. And lastly, if you would like to access closed captioning, go to your meeting controls, which is at the top right of your screen, and select More, then Language and Speech, and then turn on live captions. So with that, I will hand it over to Secretary Crowfoot for some opening remarks.
Hey, thanks, Amanda, and thanks everybody for joining. I'll just spend a couple of minutes, first of all, expressing appreciation for the work that our state team is doing on all things natural and working lands and the role they play in climate solutions, but also thank you all, whether you're conservation organizations, academic leaders, consultants, tribal governments, local governments. It's pretty remarkable what's happening across California, and I'll say the world, which is, lands are now recognized as a critical part of both our climate solutions, combating climate change, and also adjusting to climate impacts and building our resilience. It was, not so long ago when lands seemed very peripheral. So much of the focus was on technology, whether it was renewable energy or zero emission vehicles or building energy efficiency. Those are all super important, but it was actually the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, that global collection of key climate scientists, that identified the role that lands play in combating climate change. And I recall that report, now about 2 years old, identified that 3 of the 5, sort of urgent big bang for the buck actions that we could take to make fast progress reducing GHG emissions and sequestering GHG emissions are in our lands. So we were really excited in 2022 to be among the first in the world to have a detailed strategy to take climate action on our lands. And then that was obviously reinforced by the scoping plan, which I think in the same year, later in 22, really included in that equation to meet carbon neutrality, a target for our lands. We want to minimize our lands being a source of carbon and maximize them being a sink of carbon. And of course, then what followed on that is a state law change that has required that our agency establish nature-based solution targets, which we're developing and soon releasing. So I think there's an amazing movement happening that is driving more focus, more attention, more resources on our climate land strategies. Over the last couple of years, thanks to the governor and the legislature, we've had remarkable amounts of money to invest in this space, and we've made real progress. I think a lot of the best practices on natural and working lands, whether it's soil health and improving the organic content of our soils, or ecologically based wildfire and forest management, whether it's urban greening, whether it's regenerative agriculture, like all of these things are growing and we're excited. At the same time, we're always going to hold ourselves accountable to try to move further and faster, which is where this strategy update comes in. So today, I think this kicks off the process to get your input around what our update should include, because really it will be our roadmap to future state investments and policies and programs, as well as partnerships that we're involved in to try to improve climate smart land management. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for the work that you will do. This is a really wide open opportunity to provide us input early on in the update process before we have established thoughts, and certainly before we have an established draft update. So I'm excited to roll up sleeves. I've already got my sleeves rolled up and get the work underway. Back to you, Amanda.
Great. Thank you so much, Secretary Crowfoot. Really appreciate it, and appreciate you hopping on. So I'll just share the agenda for the afternoon, just so that everyone kind of knows what's going to happen. I'm going to walk through the approach that we took to develop the 2022 strategy, which, as Wade mentioned, was the first time California delivered such a strategy. And then I'll hand it off to my colleague, Clessie Bennett, who will walk through our proposed approach to the 2025 update. And then we will open it up for questions or comments. So I think we'll get started. Next slide. Great. Okay. So just to sort of set some key terms, there's a lot of terms that are involved in the work in this sector. Just to share, we talk about nature-based solutions. These are, practices that, support addressing sort of societal challenges that also work with and enhance nature. Natural and working lands is like very significant part of California's nature-based climate solutions sector. And climate smart is a term that we use just to describe the kinds of practices that deliver benefits on land. So just wanted to put that out there up front. I think one of my goals for the future is to try to reduce the terms and really make sure that the terms we end up using are understandable to the general public. Next slide. So in 2022, and the same is true today, we recognize that there is a tremendous opportunity to drive climate action in the land sector. And I think the Secretary really teed that up nicely with some of the sort of the evolution of our work in this space. But we really, really feel strongly that we need to center our climate policy and nature-based solutions in our climate policy to help shift our lands from a source of emissions to a sink. We know that not doing so or moving slowly actually increases our climate risk in California, and that the actions that we're calling for that deliver climate benefits also provide a number of other benefits to Californian society: economic prosperity, health, biodiversity, access, and more. And lastly, we are really excited to be engaged with partners around the world who are focused on scaling nature-based climate solutions, and really appreciative of being able to learn from them and share best practices. Next slide. Before I dive into the 2022 strategy, I just wanted to kind of put into context how it relates to other relevant plans and strategies in California. So at the top of the slide, you will see our scoping plan, which is our roadmap to achieving carbon neutrality. And you'll see our state's climate adaptation strategy, which reflects our overall approach to reducing climate risks and building resilience in California. The Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy informed both of those documents, and the strategy itself reflects a lot of really incredible work that has been done by subject matter experts that are, work within various sectors within the nature-based solutions world, or completely different sectors where, the integration of nature-based solutions is clearly identified as valuable, such as our climate action plan for transportation infrastructure. So that's kind of how these plans all relate to one another. And I just sometimes think it's helpful to kind of frame this out before we dive into the plan, which I will do now. Next slide. All right, so when we began thinking about our natural and working lands in California, this sector for climate action, we realized that we needed to break them down into land types, landscapes that aligned with the way that the international community measures emissions from our lands. And so we broke California's landscapes down into 8 land types: forests, shrubland chaparral, grasslands, wetlands, croplands, sparsely vegetated lands, seagrasses and seaweeds, and developed lands. I won't go into a ton of detail on what those sort of all contain, but I did just want to explain the rationale for why we broke California's natural working lands down as we did. Next slide. So our real approach in 2022, our goals were, first of all, just to take the incredible work that was sort of already underway and bring it all together so that we could look at our efforts in this sector as a whole, and also identify where we might be able to do better. We also really wanted to use this strategy as a way to increase public awareness of what nature-based climate solutions are and how they can deliver on a broad set of priorities. We also wanted the strategy to guide and accelerate climate action on our lands, and we wanted it to prioritize durable solutions that deliver multiple benefits. Fourth was the strategy. Really, it's critical that we ensure when we're doing this climate work, we're always thinking about how the work can also advance equity and opportunity. And then lastly, the 2022 strategy was our first step in thinking about how can we track and measure our collective efforts in this space. Next slide. We worked with a lot of state agency partners on the strategy, and we expect to do the same this year, if not also adding potentially new partners in who we didn't have the chance to engage in 2022. But I think something that we're really excited about is that our partners at agencies that are not traditional, environmental agencies really do see themselves as part of this climate solution and are ready to do their part. Next slide. So I'm going to just tick through the major sections of the 2022 strategy, and then I'll hand it off to Clessie. The introduction to this strategy is sort of where I think we really tried to check the box on raising public awareness of what nature-based solutions are and how they deliver on our climate goals and other priorities. So just a very sort of tight description for the layperson of what are we even talking about here and why should I care about it? What does it matter to me? Next slide. We also took the opportunity to summarize state efforts already underway to help support climate action on our lands. The summary was actually in the strategy, and then it was accompanied by an appendix that listed every single action that the state was taking to help support nature-based climate solutions in California. Next slide. This section on priority approaches is kind of the heart of the strategy. We outline what is it within this landscape type? How can climate smart forest management or climate smart grassland management limit future carbon losses, support resilient communities, support natural systems, really described as sort of holistically as possible what the climate action potential is for each of the landscape types, all 8 of them. Next slide. And we also identify for each of those landscape types priority nature-based solutions that we are confident will deliver meaningful climate benefits, and that we will be guiding the state's work and the work that we do through partners when we invest through grant programs, et cetera. Next slide. We also included for each of the landscape types a map that identifies, where in the state of California are these lands located. Next slide. In the 2022 strategy, we conducted very meaningful regional engagement and just got incredible input from members of the public. And so in the 2022 strategy, we wanted to make sure that we honored some of what we heard in those workshops, but also provide regional snapshots that hopefully sort of serve as useful tools for people who live in those regions, decision makers, land managers, landowners, right, members of communities. What is the natural and working land makeup of their region? Where are their potential where is their climate action potential in that sector? Next slide. As I mentioned, the strategy sort of takes our first step in kind of thinking about how we might track nature-based climate action and how we might measure our progress and the outcomes of that action. So a very helpful first step. Next slide. And then we wrap with setting out some near-term priorities for state action to advance our nature-based climate solutions agenda. And I think, Clessie, with that is the end of my presentation. Now I'm going to hand it off to Clessie, as I mentioned, who will walk you all through the proposed approach to our 2025 update, and then we'll open it for questions and comments.
Amanda. So for the 2025 update, we'll be taking somewhat of a similar approach to 2022 with some new sections and moving some other sections around. So as Amanda mentioned, the heart of the 2022 strategy were those landscape-based sections that included a description of the climate benefits and potential of those landscapes, as well as laid out specific priority nature-based climate solutions. So we're going to be updating these sections with the latest science and including updating any of the solutions where management may have changed or conditions on the ground are evolving. Next, we're going to be updating each of those landscape maps and regional maps to integrate the latest spatial data. Third, we will be taking the next step in our approach on understanding and tracking action and understanding the outcomes. We will be adding a new section to the strategy on identifying barriers to implementing our priority nature-based solutions and how we might overcome them. And then lastly, we'll be summarizing our progress to date, including outlining new near-term priorities for action. So that section will build off of that original section around existing efforts at the state and talk about what has happened since we did the 2022 strategy, and we'll also build upon that appendix that Amanda mentioned that includes a really comprehensive look at all the different programs and efforts around the state that are addressing and working towards increasing the scale and pace of nature-based solutions. So the next couple of slides really touch on our process over the next year. So this is a high-level timeline to get to that publishing date. So today we're having our public kickoff webinar. This will be followed by a month or so of public workshops that are oriented around our 8 landscapes that Amanda touched on earlier in the presentation. There will also be an opportunity for written input at this time. We'll also be conducting early tribal consultation and holding tribal roundtables with tribal governments at this early stage. We'll plan to release a draft of the strategy in June and then hold a public comment period as well as another tribal consultation period and host tribal roundtables on that draft. We'll use the rest of the year to incorporate all the feedback that we get and then release the final strategy early next year. As I mentioned, we're going to be holding workshops on each of the landscapes. These are going to be virtual workshops. They're starting next week and will run through the end of the month. And we can put a link in the chat where you can find the registration links to these workshops. And in these workshops, we are going to be getting into some of the specifics about what will go into the update. So we'd love your input on those priority nature-based climate solutions and how we might update them going forward. Additionally, our cross-cutting priorities. In the 2022 strategy, we laid out a number of priorities that were applicable across all of the 8 landscapes. And so we also want to revisit those and see if we want to change those going forward. And then lastly, we'd love the public's help in our new section on identifying challenges and barriers to implementing these nature-based solutions and how we might overcome them. The written opportunity will run the same length as the workshop, so it will be through the end of next month. The questions are the same as the workshop questions, and you can also find those on our website. And we'd love if you could email us this feedback at our email address, naturebasedsolutions@resources.ca.gov. And we can also put this email in the chat after the presentation as well. So with that, we'll turn it over to questions from you all. And if you, want to just queue up, we can go in the order that I'm seeing hands. And you should be able to just unmute yourself. So first I've got Pat.
So thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? I am from the Mojave Desert, and we have inputted quite a bit of unique information to show that the desert does not belong in sparsely vegetated lands, and that your original map left off desert lands of major importance. We also have provided the report called the California Desert's Role in 30 by 30 and California Sequestration and Biodiversity. And I'm wondering first if you have seen any of that or not, and that it's interesting for this sparsely vegetated land that the deserts are 28% of the state, but they have 38% of the native plants, which seems to show that they're less than sparsely vegetated, and that we have at least 10% of the sequestered carbon. We have carbon that is sequestered underground in the form of caliche, which dates back to the Ice Age, and we continue to actively sequester carbon in the mycorrhizal fungi connected with the creosote in the trees and the washes. So we have done a lot of work on this based on science that has already been performed. And so if you are unaware of it, I will send the report to nature-based solutions at resources.ca.gov.
Thank you, Pat. We are aware of it, and a member of our team actually was recently on a desert trip with a number of partners who I think contributed to that Deserts in 30 by 30 document that you referenced, but please do send it along. And thank you for your comment. I'll just say quickly, as I understand it, Klesi, correct me if I'm wrong, but deserts are not just in sparsely vegetated lands. They are also reflected in other land types. So just wanted to clarify that, but we'll go to the next question. Klesi, will you, I can't see people.
Bonnie's next.
Hi, Amanda. Hi, Klesi. Thank you so much for this kickoff webinar and this opportunity to provide comment early on. I'm curious, in the outline slide where you outlined the approach to the update, I didn't hear mention of the upcoming AB 1757 targets, and I know that that's a part of the bill language is to update the strategy in accordance to those. So I was wondering what the approach was going to be to integrate the targets.
Great question, Bonnie. Thank you for asking that. Yes, so the targets are, I think, going to be very reflective of the priority nature-based solutions that you see in the 2022 strategy, but also that will be reflected in the update to 2025. So very much want to ensure that the strategy is driving clearly on implementation of those targets. I think another really important place where we'll be, connecting those dots is in this new section on barriers to implementation and solutions. So we'll be extremely focused on ensuring that, the work that we're calling for in the strategy is going to deliver on the targets in the time frame that those targets call for.
Okay, that's really helpful. Another quick follow-up on that. Are you planning on having, hard numbers in the update to meet the targets? Because the targets will be numerical.
The targets are numerical.
And so the priorities in the update, will they reflect those numbers?
Yes.
Okay, great.
All right, next we have Lauren.
Hi, sorry about that. I didn't mean to raise my hand 3 times. Thanks for your work on this. I was happy to see, I work for a Sierra Foothill Conservancy, a nonprofit regional land trust. We do conservation easements, fee title preserves, rematriation, fee title transfers, recreation, stewardship, restoration, all of these things. But happy to see protection in there, as that's the first step to the advancement of the other pieces outlined in this. Really also happy to see biodiversity sprinkled throughout, and then avoidance of conversion. I think those are all of the basics to enable these other goals to occur. I think my only real comment addition stuff might have been in the grasslands area. I think that in the easiest way to, I think we have grazing management regimes that work to support positive ecological outcomes and to increase the amount of deep-rooted quality rangeland grasses for improved. I thought maybe we add soil health in there right before vegetation for feed. And as that's the basis for all of these things to occur. And then definitely the lowest hanging fruit, I think, for investment from the state perspective is grazing management regime adaptation for producers. And producers are, I think, flexible, willing to make changes if there is, cost incentives for them, either in the form of, cost share or in the form of increased productivity for forage, which means more, animal units on the property. And I think, getting those initiatives out through private organizations or other entities like RCDs or land trusts that have good relationships with private landowners and can hopefully facilitate that. Think of like Point Blue or even Land Trust, CCLT, CARCD. And then I think, I think that's your lowest hanging fruit for making change, for making like sweeping change. And then on B, I would just change preserve to protect instead, just to stay consistent. And preserve sometimes throws the red flag for people and they don't think it can be working lands. Love to see, put a star by that. And I also liked that you guys made sure to note that compost is only applicable in appropriate contexts. I do know that we've had a lot of, we're just endeavoring into our first application of compost on one of our fee title preserves as an experiment with Point Blue and a couple other entities. And then we will, share that out to producers or other entities to scale that up if we think it's appropriate. So far in the foothills, we don't have much data on that. So happy to share that once it comes out. I do know that there's been concerns in the past from CNPS and other entities about the integrity of native plants in the application of compost and how that could affect them. And so glad that you noted that it's when it's ecologically appropriate. But yeah, that's all I think I have in here. And also glad that you added landowners to the back on page 9.
Awesome. Thank you. Very helpful.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think next we have Jeannie.
Hi there. Great to see you all. Thanks so much for the presentation. I just had a couple clarifying questions. Amanda, I appreciated your response on AB 1757 and the targets. I just wanted to clarify the timeline though. So the targets relating to natural working lands coming out vis-a-vis the sort of AB 1757 process, will those targets, when are the targets coming out? And how does that inform the upcoming sort of webinar series? Because I would imagine for example, in talking about croplands, that it would be helpful to understand the kinds of targets that the state is considering vis-a-vis agriculture, for example, to then relate those targets to the conversation around strategies. So that's one set of questions, and then I'll just add my second question just briefly. I appreciate your comment earlier about terms and wanting to streamline terms, and I'm wondering how the current effort, and this may be more of a conversation with CDFA, but the current effort to define regenerative agriculture is informing this process. So thanks so much.
Great. Okay, let's see. I'm terrible when there's multiple questions, so if I don't actually answer them, please tell me.
Sorry.
So on the first one, when are the targets going to be released? As soon as possible, and certainly before the draft is released. And our hope for these workshops is to really get a strong sense of what the priority nature-based solutions should be. And if there's a need to make adjustments to those targets, perhaps we will explore that. But I think, I can't give you an exact date of when they're going to be released because it just kind of depends on things that are out of my control. But as soon as possible, and certainly before the draft. And then for regenerative agriculture, I haven't talked to Virginia or anyone at CDFA yet about what the nexus is with their effort to define regenerative agriculture. Although, and I don't want to speak for them because I'm going to get this wrong, but I think there's a very narrow scope for that definition that they're thinking about. So that's a great question, and I will just commit to following up with her and kind of coming up with a strategy, and happy to talk to you and her offline if that's helpful.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to raise my own hand. I'm not seeing any other raised hands at this moment.
All right.
Although I did just see something come in the chat. Based on the land classification highlighted, under what land use category do they fall?
I think this question might be about the sort of more detailed description of how did we come to these definitions and what do they mean? So maybe Clessie, if you could just commit to following up. Is it Dwight who wrote this? I'm having trouble. Yeah. We can follow up with you, Dwight. I'll just say there's a very clear description of how these lands are defined in the 2022 strategy, and we can follow up to send that to you, just pull it right out and send it in an email. And then your next question is really a critical question. What is the MRV used on nature-based solutions? And this is part of a much bigger process that we are working on with CARB. But the bill that Bonnie referenced, that Secretary Crowfoot referenced, and Jeannie just referenced, AB 1757, really calls for a sea change in the way that California drives climate action in this sector, and pushes us forward on this question of MRV for nature-based solutions. So there's no sort of clear answer to that at this moment, but I think that's one of the important areas of work ahead of us, and why we're sort of making very clear that this next iteration, the chapter on tracking action and measuring progress, is going to be a next step in that process of thinking through MRV. Oh, great. Awesome. There you go. Thanks, Classie. All right, I think Classie and I will hang here for just a few more minutes in case there are other questions or comments that folks would like to make. And then if not, we will wrap up. Lauren.
Would you like help on definition of regenerative ag?
So there is a public process that our partners at the Department of Food and Agriculture are supporting, and I am confident that they would love input and support. I don't have details on what sort of how to get connected into that process off the top of my head, but again, we could totally follow up and let you know kind of how to get involved.
Yeah, we have a certified rangeland manager on our team. We're very lucky, state and federal or state and national certification. And then he also is like actually implementing stuff on the ground.
Oh, cool.
So both. And I think he would be really helpful for that. So yeah, if you have my email, or do you want me to just put it in the chat?
If you put it in the chat, that would be awesome, because that's the easiest, but we probably could find it if need be.
Okay.
In a hand from Heather.
Hi, this is Heather Tallis. My name recognition here is wrong. I was formerly with the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, and I'm not anymore, so I'm representing myself right now,
Okay.
not the federal government. I apologize. But I'm a resident of Santa Cruz, so very excited to see you all doing this for California, and was excited to actually just look through the original strategy today. So very excited to see the update coming as well. So given my previous role, I just did want to make sure you all are aware of the National Nature-Based Solutions Roadmap that came out in 2022. Okay. And given that, and I saw the flag in the last strategy for leveraging federal funds, I'm wondering if you're planning to go any further on those opportunities and provide any more sort of information or guidance to folks on how they can leverage federal funds for nature-based solutions in the state. I know it's time sensitive, so challenging to put into a multi-year strategy, but I just noticed you have OES on there and HHS, and I didn't notice on the quick slide, but if transportation's involved, there's just some huge buckets of funds from the federal side that now allow nature-based solutions that didn't in the past, that seem like real opportunities for the state to leverage and move forward. So just curious if there's any way you all see to put a little more spotlight on that, so folks are aware and looking for those opportunities for implementation.
Yeah, that is a great question. I mean, we are working very aggressively to position California for those funds and trying to be as helpful as possible to partners and sort of alerting them. My colleague, Sarah Amanzada, she's our Deputy Secretary for External Affairs, I think, or she's also our federal liaison and really very focused on exactly this. And I did not think about how to, spotlight the federal funding, but I think that's a really great idea. And you're right, it's, it'll be a moment in time, but it's a historic moment in time and one that we should really give a nod to in the update. So appreciate that suggestion. Thank you.
Thanks. And if I can follow on that, maybe on the moment in time piece, there are longstanding programs that just have additional funding now that will continue to have funding in the future, likely just at different levels. So perhaps emphasizing those can, remove some of the transient risk of things going out of date.
Yep. Totally good call.
I'm not seeing any more hands, and I think I have answered the questions in the chat.
So I think we'll say going once, going twice. And if not, then please don't hesitate to reach out to us we can use that Nature-Based Solutions web email address. Many of you have our direct contact information, and really would appreciate, to the extent that you think others would be interested or could really contribute to our work, to join the relevant landscape specific deep dives that we're going to be holding this month. And I'll finish by saying, the 2022 strategy was really profoundly improved through public engagement and comment. And so we are very much hoping that that will also be the case for the 2025 update. There's just an incredible group of people with experience and expertise that we really appreciate hearing from and engaging with and learning from. So thank you all for being here, and look forward to future engagement over the course of the next 12 months. And with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you all so much, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you.